Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The quote of the day is: there are disasters that are entirely man-made, but none that are entirely natural. Today the topic of presentation is man-made disasters and bioterrorism under the supervision of Professor Dr. Saira Afzal. The learning outlines of today's presentation is introduction to the man-made disasters and its classification, what are biological disasters, chemical disasters, oil spillage, forest fire, bioterrorism, and the MCQs. By the end of this presentation, participants will be able to describe what are man-made disasters and its classification, biological disaster, chemical disaster, oil spillage, forest fires, and bioterrorism. Now, what are man-made disasters? These are also called anthropogenic hazards, are disastrous events caused directly or principally by one or more identifiably deliberate or negligible human actions. Man-made disasters are the result of human intent, error, or as a result of failed systems. They are intentionally or unintentional. All kind of man-made disaster affects persons' mental, physical, and social well-being. Mainly they affect the loss of life, damage to the nation's economy, social disruptions, long-term damage, and widespread effects, for example, the nuclear explosions. Now, man-made disaster model by the Professor Barry Turner that is given in 1978. According to him, disasters arise from an interaction between the human and the organizational arrangements of the socio-technical system set up to manage complex and ill-structured risk problems. Technological disasters are usually associated with man-made infrastructures and are typically accidental. Consequences of natural disasters can be increased as a result of technological advances and human activities such as agriculture and forestry. Now, the causes and the reasons of man-made disasters. They can be due to ignorance, carelessness, unawareness, illiteracy, strikes, human error, tourism, terrorism, vandalism, weapons, water and sewage overflow, or the chemicals. Now, the following factors that contributes to the inevitability of the man-made disasters. These are the size and population densities of the cities or the overcrowding of the cities, intensive utilization of rapid forms of mass transport, poorly organized emergency services, lack of warning to the people, use of high technology sources of energy, and increasing pressure to the mine fossil fuel. The general categorization of man-made disasters. First is those in which disaster occurred in circumscribed community. For example, a landslide in the form of slurry occurred at the mining site during rain that killed workers and their family members who were present at that time. And second is those in which the victims of disaster did not come from the circumscribed community. For example, transportation of disasters and oil uh, rig fires. Now, the classification of the man-made disasters, they can either be technological, industrial, or warfare. In technological disasters, they can be biological disasters, building collapses, forest fire, road accidents, and aviation disasters. While in industrial disasters, it can be chemical and oil spills, chemical disasters, nuclear and radioactive disasters. And in warfare, these can be wars and the civil conflicts. Now, the biological disasters. The devastating effects caused by an enormous spread of a certain kind of living organism that may spread disease, viruses, or infestation of plant, animal, or insect life on an epidemic or pandemic level. Epidemic level is that in which it indicates a disaster that affects many people in a given area or a community. While the biological disaster that is of pandemic level is that indicates a disaster that affects a much larger region, sometimes an entire continent or even the whole planet. For example, the recent COVID-19 and H1N1 or the swine flu pandemic. This is the sign of the biological hazard that was proposed by the Charles Baldwin uh, in 1966. If a volatile, toxic, or flammable material is spilled, immediately warn everyone to evacuate the area and turn off all the electrical and spark producing equipment if possible. Use a fire extinguisher to extinguish any flames if applicable, and add these items to your disaster survival kit like plastic sheeting, duct tape, and scissors. Now the biological disaster classifications. The US Center for Disease Control classified biohazards into 4 biosafety levels that are given below. Uh, the first biosafety level includes the bacteria and viruses including Bacillus subtilis, some cell cultures, canine hepatitis, and non-infectious bacteria. Their protection is only through facial protection and gloves. While in biosafety level 2, these include the bacteria and viruses that cause only mild disease to humans or are difficult to contact via aerosol in a lab setting such as hepatitis A, B, C, mumps, measles, HIV, and others. Their protection is through the use of autoclaves for sterilizing and biological safety cabinets. In biosafety level 3, bacteria and viruses that cause that are severe to fatal disease in humans. Examples are West Nile virus, anthrax, Middle East respiratory syndrome, coronavirus. Their protection is to stringent safety protocols such as the use of respirators to prevent airborne infection. While in biosafety level 4, these include the potentially fatal to human beings viruses like Ebola virus, Marburg virus, Lassa fever virus, and others. Their protection is by the use of positive pressure personal suit with the segregated air supply. Prevention of biological hazards. The basic measure to prevent and control biohazards is the elimination of source of the contamination. Now the prevention for workers in the field, the medical measures and the other measures. The engineering controls include the proper ventilation, installing negative pressure and usage of ultraviolet lamps. Personal hygiene includes the washing hands with liquid soap, proper care for clothes that have been exposed to or probably contaminated with environment. Personal protective equipments include masks, protective clothing, gloves, face shield, eye shield, and shoe covers. And sterilization includes using ultra heat or high pressure to eliminate bacteria or using biocide to kill microbes. Respiratory protection includes surgical masks, respirators, power air purifying respirators, air supplying respirators. Now the prevention of biological disasters. Prevention includes the following measures that should be taken before, during, and after the outbreaks. The environmental management includes the safe water supply, proper maintenance of sewage pipelines to prevent waterborne disease such as cholera, typhoid, hepatitis, and dysentery. Awareness of personal hygiene and provision for washing, cleaning, bathing, avoiding and overcrowding. Vector control measures include environmental and engineering work and generic integrated vector control measures. Water management, not permitting water to stagnate and collect, and other methods to eliminate breeding places for the vectors. Regular spraying of insecticides, outdoor fogging, etc. for controlling the vectors and controlling the population of the rodents. Post-disaster epidemic preventions include the risk of epidemics is increased after any biological disaster. Integrated disease surveillance system monitors the sources, modes of diseases spread, and investigates the epidemics. Now the detection and containment of the outbreaks. This consists of four steps as given below: recognizing and diagnosing by primary healthcare practitioners, communicating surveillance information to public health authorities, epidemiological analysis of surveillance data, public health measures, and delivering proper medical treatment. Now come towards the nuclear and radiation accidents. Any event involving significant release of radioactivity to the environment or a reactor core meltdown and which leads to major undesirable consequences to people, the environment, or the facility. A nuclear and radiation accident is defined by the International Atomic Energy Agency as an event that has led to significant consequences to people, the environment, or the facility. Examples include the lethal effects to individuals, large radioactivity release to the environment, reactor, or the reactor core melt. This is the picture of the Chernobyl nuclear plant in Ukraine's Soviet Union that occurs in 1986. This Chernobyl disaster in 1986, the accident killed approximately 30 people directly and damaged approximately $7 billion of property and 4,000 additional cancer deaths related to the accident among those exposed to the significant radiation levels. Approximately 350,000 people were forcibly resettled away from these areas soon after the accident. 6,000 people were involved in cleaning Chernobyl and 10,800 square miles were contaminated. This is the picture after the nuclear disaster has occurred in Chernobyl. The second nuclear disaster that occurs in Japan is the Fukushima nuclear disaster that occurs in 2011. Following the 2011 Japanese Fukushima nuclear disaster, authorities shut down the nation's 54 nuclear power plants. As of 2013, the Fukushima site remains radioactive, with some of 160,000 evacuees still living in the temporary housing. Although nobody has died or is expected to die from the radiation effect, the difficult cleanup job will take up to 40 years and cost tens of billions of dollars. The Fukushima nuclear disaster occurs due to the tsunami in 2011. Now, the disaster due to the nuclear atomic bombs on the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The United States detonated two nuclear weapons over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on 6th and 9th of August 1945, respectively, during the World War II. The two bombings killed about 129,000 and 26,000 people, most of whom were civilians, and remain only the use of and this is the only the use of nuclear weapons in armed conflict. An increase in leukemia appeared about 2 years after the attacks and peaked around 4 to 6 years later. The Radiation Effects Research Foundation estimates the attributable risk of leukemia to be 46% for the bomb victims. Now, the radiation effects on the humans. The radiation effect on humans depends upon the size of the dose, amount of energy that is deposited in the body, and the ability of the radiation to harm the human tissue and those and which organs are affected by the radiations. The unit for radiation hazard due to radiation is REM, and this is the ranges and these are the effects. If the dose is less, then the effects will be less. If the dose is within the range of 50 to 20 5 to 20 grams, then the possible late effects and these are can be the chromosomal damage. And if the dose is 20 to 100 grams, then there is temporary reduction in white blood cells. And if the dose is 100 to 20, 100 to 200 grams, then there is mild radiation sickness with a few or that of vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, reduction resistant to infection. And if the dose is 200 to 300, there are serious radiation sickness. And if the dose is 400 to 1000, then it can cause acute illness. Now, this is the way by which the radioactive material causes hazards to the humans. The radiations disperse in the air and in the environment. Their radiation deposited can directly affect the humans, or they may be deposited in the crops, soils, and animals. And when the human consume crops and animal milk or meat, it can cause the human hazard due to radiations. And that radiation hazard can also occur due to from the soils. Now, the chemical disaster. A chemical incident is the uncontrolled release of a toxic substance, potentially resulting in harm to public health and the environment. Chemical incidents can occur as a result of natural events or as a result of accidental or intentional events. These incidents can be sudden and acute or have a slow onset when there is silent release of a chemical. They can also range from small releases to full-scale major emergencies. Though this is an incident of the chemical disaster, that is the Bhopal gas tragedy. This is the most dangerous chemical accident reported in the history that occurred in 1984 in Bhopal gas tragedy in India, in which more than 3,000 people died after a highly toxic vapor, that is methyl isocyanate, that was released at the Union Carbonate Pesticides Factory. The term chemical disaster might refer to anthropogenic or technological events that includes an exploration at a factory that stores or uses chemicals, contamination of the food or water supply with a chemical, a leak from a storage unit during transportation, or a deliberate release of chemicals in conflict or terrorism, or an outbreak of disease that is associated with the chemical exposure. No, this is the management of the chemical disaster reduction management. First step in the reduction is hazard risk analysis. Second is the multi-hazard impact analysis. Then assessment of the consequences. Then emergency planning. Then preparedness is formulated, and then response is given. Then there is emergency response and evaluation, and there is disaster management strategy, and at the last is the site risk assessment, and the this cycle of minimizing the reduction continues. Now these are the precautions for chemical disasters. The industries that uses harmful and powerful chemicals should be located far away from the residential areas. There should be surveys to keep a check on their activity. The government should formulate an emergency plan to in case of an accident, and pollution levels should be checked and maintained. Now the oil and chemical spillage. Oil and chemical spillage is one of the most devastating environmental disasters that can happen because it affects people, animals, the land, and the coastal waterways. They can kill wildlife, destroy habitats, and contaminate critical resources in food chain. They can also wreak havoc on economies of coastal communities by forcing the closure of fisheries, driving away the tourists, or temporarily shutting down the navigation routes. And these environmental and economic damages can linger for decades. Every year it happens 1,000 times around the nation. These spills range from small ship collisions to fuel transfer mishaps to massive events. Know the causes of spillage. These may be due to people making mistakes or being careless, or the breakage of the equipment, or the natural disasters in the ocean, such as hurricanes, or deliberate acts by the terrorist countries at war, vandals, or illegal dumpers, or the transportation accidents. Oil spillage hazards. The oil that spills floats on the salt water in the ocean and usually floats on the fresh water. Oil usually spreads out rapidly across the water surface to form a thin layer that we call an oil slick. As the spreading process continues, the layer becomes thinner and thinner, finally becoming a very thin layer called a sheen, which often looks like a rainbow. Depending upon the circumstances, oil spills can be very harmful to marine birds and mammals, and also can harm fish and shellfish. It destroys the insulating ability of fur-bearing mammals. Depending on just where and when a spill happens, from just a few up to hundreds or thousands of birds and mammals can be killed or injured. Now, this is an example of a deep water horizon oil spillage in the Gulf of Mexico. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill was an industry disaster that began on 20th April 2010 in the Gulf of Mexico. The US federal government estimated the total discharge of 780,000 meter cube of the oil. After several failed efforts to maintain the flow, the well was declared sealed on 19 September 2010. Reports in early 2012 indicated that the well site was still leaking. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill is regarded as one of the largest environmental disasters in the American history. Know how to prepare for an oil and chemical spillage. Contact your local emergency management office to find out how the public will be notified in the event of an oil and chemical spill incident, and the actions the public must take in the event of hazardous release. Listen to local radio and television stations for detailed information and instructions. Follow the instructions carefully. You should stay away from the area to minimize the risk of contamination. Remember that some toxic chemicals are odorless. Alert people in immediate area of the spill. Determine the chemical nature of the spill and check the material safety data sheet. If the material is highly toxic or hazardous, call emergency helpline. Know the structure collapses or the building collapses. Structure collapses are often caused by the engineering failure. That is a sudden fall down or cave in any type of structure due to various natural reasons, for example, coastal attack, floods, tsunami, tornado, and others, and artificial reasons that are terrorist attack, under design, arson, and etc. Such building collapse. Buildings are designed to support certain loads without deformity excessively. The loads are the heights of the peoples and objects. Causes of building collapse. This can be due to bad design, faulty construction, foundation failure, extraordinary load, unexpected failure mode, and combination of these causes. Effects and consequences of building collapse. The collapse of structures, including building, may result in death or serious injury to the employees and the public. It may damage the adjacent structure and there is the loss of property. The immediate action needed to be taken are to check for injuries and administer first aid, don't move seriously injured individuals, communicate number and identity of missing persons to emergency services, don't enter damaged, unstable building to search for missing persons. No prevention and remedies. Always hire professional for building design and construction work. These are all about the engineering measures, managing measures, understanding reinforcements, foundation, using the right steel, using the right concrete mix ratio. These are all the engineering measures for the prevention and remedies of the building collapses. Now, this is the worst example in the history of the world that is of the building collapse, that is the collapse of the World Trade Center. This occurred during the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, after the Twin Towers were struck by two hijacked commercial airlines. A total of 2,763 people were killed in the crashes, fires, and subsequent collapses, including 2,192 civilians, 343 firefighters, 71 law and enforcement officers, the passengers and crew on the airplanes that are 147 civilians and 10 are the hijackers. Now the forest fire. The most common hazard in the forest is forest fire. They pose a threat not only to the forest wealth but also to the entire regime of fauna and flora, seriously disturbing the biodiversity and ecology and environment of a region. During summer, when there is no rain for months, the forest becomes littered with dry, senescent leaves and twigs, which could burst into flames ignited by the slightest spark. The types of forest fire can either be surface fire or the crown fire. Surface fire is that which occurs on the ground level by the dried leaves and the straws of the trees, and the crown fire when the fire is on the top of the trees. The effect of forest fire. The effect of forest fire is the loss of valuable timber resources, loss of biodiversity and extinction of plants and animals, loss of wildlife habitat and depletion of wildlife, loss of natural regeneration and reduction in forest cover and global warming, loss of carbon sink resources and increase in percentage of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, change in microclimate of the area with unhealthy living conditions, soil erosion affecting productivity of the soils and production, ozone layer depletion, and at the last is health problems leading to the diseases. The needs of the fire management. Prevention of human cause fire through education and environmental modification. It will include cultural activities, engineering work, people participation, and education and enforcement. Prompt reduction of fires through a well-coordinated network of observation points, efficient ground patrolling, and communication networks. Remote sensing technology is to be given due importance in fire detection. Fast initial attack measures, vigorous follow-up action, introducing a forest fuel modification system at strategic points, and firefighting resources. Now coming towards the bioterrorism. Bioterrorism is the deliberate release of viruses, bacteria, toxins, or other harmful agents to cause illness or death in people, animals, or plants. These agents are typically found in nature but could be mutated or altered to increase their ability to cause disease, make them resistant to current medicines, or to increase their ability to be spread into the environment. Biological agents can be spread through the air, water, or in food. Biological agents are attractive to terrorists because they are extremely difficult to detect and do not cause illness for several hours to several days. Some bioterrorism agents, like smallpox virus, can spread from person to person, while others, like anthrax, cannot. Bioterrorism may be favored because biological agents are relatively easy and inexpensive to obtain, can be easily disseminated, and can cause widespread fear and panic beyond the actual physical damage. Military leaders, however, have learned that as a multi-asset, bioterrorism has some important limitations, as it is difficult to use a bioweapon in a way that only affects the enemy and not friendly forces. A biological weapon is used to terrorists mainly as a method of creating mass panic and disruption to the state and country. However, technologies such as Billjoy have warned of the potential power which genetic engineering may place in hands of future bioterrorists. The history of bioterrorism. Shortly after the start of the World War I, Germany launched a biological sabotage campaign in United States, Russia, Romania, and France. At that time, Anton Dilger, who lived in Germany, but in 1915 he was sent to the United States carrying cultures of glanders, a virulent disease of horses and mules. Dilger set up a laboratory in his home in Chevy Chase, Maryland. He used Steve Doors working the dogs in Baltimore to infect horses and with glanders while they were waiting to be shipped to Britain. Dilger was under suspicion as being a German agent but was never arrested. Dilger eventually fled to Madrid, Spain, where he died during the influenza pandemic of 1918. Smallpox. In 1980, the World Health Organization announced the eradication of smallpox, a highly contagious and incurable disease. Although disease has been eliminated in the world, frozen stocks of smallpox virus are still maintained by the governments of the USA and Russia. Disaster consequences are feared if rogue politicians or terrorists were to get hold of the smallpox strain. Since vaccination programs are not terminated, the world population is more susceptible to smallpox than ever before. While the smallpox has been eliminated from the world, but some countries still have the vaccinations of the smallpox if any incidents in the laboratory occurs, so that they can immediately vaccinate the people. Now the anthrax. Anthrax has been used as a weapon around the world for nearly a century. In 2001, powdered anthrax spores were deliberately put into the letters that were mailed through US postal system. 22 people, including 12 male handlers, got anthrax, and five of these 22 people died. In June 1993, the religious group Om Shrinkyo released anthrax in Tokyo. The attack was a failure because it did not infect a single person. The reason for this is due to the fact that that group used the vaccine strain of the bacterium. Know the anthrax as a future weapon. If a bioterrorist attack were to happen, Bacillus anthracis, the bacteria that causes anthrax, would be one of the biological agents that will be most likely to be used. Biological agents are agents that can sicken or kill people, livestock, or crops. Anthrax is one of the most likely agents to be used because anthrax spores are easily found in nature, can be produced in a lab, and can last for a long time in the environment. Anthrax makes a good weapon because it can be released quietly and without anyone knowing. The microscopic spores could be put into the powders, sprays, food, and water. Because they are so small, you may not be able to see, smell, or taste them. Anthrax has been used as a weapon before. Now the spread of anthrax. An anthrax attack could take many forms. For example, it could be placed in letters and mail, as it was done in USA in 2001. It could be put into food or water. It can be released into the air from a truck, building, or plane. This type of attack would mean the anthrax spores could easily be blown around the wind or carried on the people's clothes, shoes, and other objects. It only takes a small amount of anthrax to infect a large number of people. If anthrax spores were released into the air, people could breathe them in and get sick with anthrax. Inhalation anthrax is the most serious form and can kill quickly if not treated immediately. If the attack were not detected by one of the monitoring systems in place, it might go unnoticed until doctors begin to see unusual patterns of illness among sick people showing up at emergency rooms. Now the classification of bioweapons. CDC classifies these biogens into three categories that are A, B, and C. In category A includes those high priority agents that pose a risk to national security, can be easily transmitted and disseminated, result in high mortality, have potential major public health impact, may cause public panic, or require special action for public health preparedness. These include in category A are COVID-19, anthrax, smallpox, botulinum toxin, bubonic plague, and viral hemorrhagic fever. In category B, those agents are included that are moderately easy to disseminate and have low mortality rates. These include brucellosis, epsilon toxin of Clostridium perfringens, food safety threats, for example, Salmonella species E. coli, Shigella, and Staphylococcus aureus, and glanders. In category C, those agents are included that are emerged pathogens that might be engineered for mass dissemination because of their availability, ease of production and dissemination, high mortality rate, or ability to cause a major health impact. These include Nipah virus and hantavirus. Now, the emergency preparedness and response in case of the bioterrorism. This can be before, during, or after. The before a biological threat occurs, the measures that needs to be done are: a biological attack may or may not be immediately obvious. In most cases, local healthcare workers will report a pattern of unusual illness, or there will be wave of sick people seeking emergency medical attention. You would be alerted through an emergency radio or TV broadcast, a telephone call, or a home visit from an emergency response worker. To prepare, build an emergency supply kit, make a family emergency plan, check with your doctor to make sure everyone in your family has up-to-date immunizations. Consider installing a high-efficiency particulate air filter in your furnace return duct, which will filter out most biological agents that may enter your house. And during a biological threat, the first evidence of an attack may be when you notice symptoms of the disease caused by the exposure to an agent. In the event of a biological attack, public health officials may not immediately be able to provide information on what you should do. It will take time to figure out exactly what the illness is, how it should be treated, and who is in danger. And during a threat, watch TV, listen to the radio, or check the internet for official news and information, including signs and symptoms of the disease, areas in danger, if medications or vaccinations are being distributed, where to seek medical attention if you become ill. If you become aware of a suspicious substance, quickly get away. Cover your mouth and nose with layers of fabric that can filter the air but still allow breathing. Examples include 2 to 3 layers of cotton such as t-shirt, handkerchief, or towel. Depending upon the situation, wear a face mask to reduce inhaling or spreading germs. If you have been exposed to a biological agent, remove and bag your clothes and personal items. Follow official instructions for disposal of contaminated items. Wash yourself with soap and water and put on clean clothes. Contact authorities and seek medical assistance. You may be advised to stay away from others or even to quarantine. If your symptoms match those described and you are in the group considered at risk, immediately seek emergency medical attention. Follow the instructions of doctor and other public health officials. Avoid crowding. Wash your hands with soap and water frequently. Do not share food and utensils. And after a biological threat, pay close attention to all official warnings and instructions on how to proceed. Medical services for a biological event may be handled differently due to increased demand. The basic procedures and medical protocol for handling exposure to biological agents are the same as for any infectious disease. Now coming towards the MCQs. First MCQ is, which of the microorganisms pose a potential risk to national security and can be easily transmitted and disseminated, that results in high mortality and may cause public panic or require special action for public health preparedness according to CDC classification. Either it is Salmonella, Bacillus anthracis, Brucellosis, or Clostridium perfringens.
Bacillus anthracis.
Yes, Bacillus anthracis is the correct option uh, as according to the CDC classification. The long-term health effects reported 2 to 6 years later after the nuclear attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 due to nuclear radiation damage are skin burns, chromosomal damage, leukemia, or deafness. Which is the correct option?
Leukemia.
Yes, leukemia is the long-term effect of the nuclear attack. According to US Center for Disease Control, the infectious agent like HIV, which is difficult to contact via aerosol, is placed at which biosafety level? Whether it is biosafety level 1, 2, 3, or 4. HIV is placed in basic safety level, biosafety level number 2, um, because it is difficult to contact by aerosol. The recent spread of COVID-19 has a vast range of biological hazards. Which of the following measures do you think are of no use to combat COVID-19? Whether these are ventilation of rooms, less crowding, movement of people, or wearing a face mask.